So you can see the extent of influence of the Ottoman Empire towards the Muslims in Mindanao. They're not really wearing much of Arab dresses, but it's really more on sarong, or in our language it's called malong. And many of them, when they go to the masjid, they just wear sarong to pray. And also fez as a kind of the influence of the Ottomans. So there was really a linkage between a far-flung place called the Ottoman Empire, and in Southeast Asia, the Muslims in the Philippines, especially in the island of Mindanao. Where you can see here are the men, the assistants of the Tatus and Raha, and probably the Sultan in that region. You can see the arrival of the Tatus, the nobility, and how, and I think they will also show the warrior dance, the Sarimanok dance of the warriors during that time. This is between, I think, I'm not exactly what is the exact year, but it's between 1920s to 1930s, before the outbreak of the Second World War. So this is the warrior dance among the Maranaos. And then later at the video, the last part are the wives of the Datus. So these are part of our ancestry, our great-grandfathers and grandmothers during the time when they were living in 1920s to 1930s. After this wire dance, the video will show one of the wives of the Datu, and probably how the houses are built and constructed in a design called Torogan, how the Maranao live in that. So these are the children of the Datu family. And I think one of the wives will be shown in the video, so you can see that. So they're not wearing, our grandmothers are not wearing, how do you call it, veil or hijab. So they are very particular with the formation of their hair, as are, so how they do their makeup and everything. So it's very, very exquisite and aesthetically done. So that's the last part of the video. We can end there, and then I'll please show the PowerPoint presentation, because I already consumed 4 minutes or 5 minutes, and Azar will constrain me of my time during the presentation. Now, the Muslims in the Philippines, it didn't start just in a vacuum. There were, at the time, it was a polyphonic, multicultural, inter-civilizational relationship. There was an immense influence of Hindu culture, Buddhist culture. Even in our language, you can see the remnants of Hinduism, of Buddhism, and also of Islam at the time. So it was a mix of Hindu, Buddhist, Hindu culture and belief systems as it formulates the social political configuration of the Muslims in the Philippines. But it changes at the time when Gamal Abdel Nasser, the previous president or prime minister of Egypt, came to the elites of the Muslims in the Philippines, in the southern part of the region, propagating that Al-Azhar University in Cairo will provide scholarships, especially for the young males, to learn different classical sources of Islam, sciences, mathematics. So the first batch of Muslim scholars, young male scholars in the Middle East, were the founder of the More Islamic Liberation Front, Shim Salamat. Um, so they learned different social sciences and even physical sciences, not only Islam. So when they came back to the region, to the Philippines, there was a confluence of knowledge. It was not a clash, but it was supplemental to the traditionalist scholars, those homegrown scholars of Muslims in that region. So there was a convergence of classical Islamic scholarship coming from Al-Azhar University to the Muslims in the Philippines. So it was a supplementary, it contributed to the development of Islamic knowledge. And that was during that time, even before the 1967 Arab-Israeli war. It stopped. The scholarship was stopped because of the because of the Israeli preemptive strike to Egypt. And then in 1980s, everything changed. With the advent of the petrodollars of the oil well rich country, Saudi Arabia, came and provided Muslim scholarship, particularly to only young male Moros, Muslims in the Philippines. So when these young male Moros were educated in Riyadh, in many different parts of Saudi Arabia after some quite time, and it was also at the stage where the Islamic city of Marawi was established. Before it was just called City of Marawi or Marawi City. I think everyone knows who are doing security studies how Marawi City is now destroyed at this time because of the Marawi siege by terrorists and ISIS. So in 1985, they institutionalized the city of Marawi, called it Islamic City of Marawi because of the contribution of the late King Faisal of the Saudi state. And they also provided construction funding to establish masjid in many places in that region. And when this young male came back to this region in Mindanao, there was actually a clash, not only of two clashes, but actually three clashes. Those Muslims who were educated from Al-Azhar University, who were oriented with classical madhab schools, and the modernist, I would call it modernist education that the young male Moros got from the Saudi education and the traditionalist Muslims in the Philippines. So when they came back to the region, they propagated which one are haram, which one are halal, which one are Islamic, and which one are un-Islamic. So there were so many tensions, clashes of paradigmatic shifts and belief systems among those who were educated from Saudi, those who were educated from Al-Azhar, from Egypt, and those who were educated within the bounds of the Philippine jurisdiction. So I haven't moved with my slides. I only have shorter time. So since I'm going to, and I'll just jump from the history. There was many conflicts because there were economic negligence, political enemies, in the southern part of the Philippines, how the wealth are not well redistributed from the Manila imperial city. So there were revolutions, those who fought back against the Philippine state for them to establish their own political state of Islamic, or probably first with Moro National Liberation Front, providing more leniency towards the National Front belief system of Nur Miswari, and then the second revolutionary group, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, more lenient to Islamic political Islam. And after several years or decades, the Bangsamoro revolutionary group, led by the More Islamic Liberation Front, or MILF, had formed a contract, partnership with the Philippine national government, and it was through the enactment of the Bangsamoro Organic Law that the new Bangsamoro Parliament was established to represent and to provide more economic peace gains, and also more political representation to the national government through their Congress and Parliament partnership. So the current leadership of the Bangsamoro government wanted to provide a more inclusive way of understanding in terms of political governance, or governance per se. And since the Bangsamoro government is not only composed of Muslims, but they also have Christian settlers, and they also have indigenous peoples. So you have this tripartite societal community between Muslims, Moros, Christian settlers, Moros, and the indigenous peoples, Moros. So how would the present leadership of the Bangsamoro government would lead and provide more guidance? So the chief minister made clear his idea of what they call moral governance, and it is clearly stated here how the Bangsamoro government chief minister would think and how he would perceive and contemplate about what is moral governance. But it is really difficult because there is not so much literature in the academic realm. There are also not so much experience because these are rebels and have no any public management or public administration experience on how to govern a government, in fact, in a regional government. So he used this term moral governance as a part of the transgression from corruption, providing more representation to different communal settlers in the Bangsamoro government. And also, it's also a way for him, but this is what it's not an inclusivist term, because if the chief minister wanted to join and rejoin the IPs and also the Christians, he wouldn't root it from the Islamic perspective. But for him, it is an Islamic way of governance. And when I was, trying to extrapolate on what is really the operational definition of moral governance, I tried to contemplate and think on what could be the theorems and principles that will guide the young parliament in their policy state formulation that is, relying on the principles of moral governance. And this is what I actually have think. I think for me, there are 5 theorems or general principles that would include in the characteristics of a moral governance polity. Of course, we'll start with faith. As you can see here, faith includes the magnanimity and confidence acquired through sets of duty-bound obligations, goals, and so on and so on. But there are certain 2 elements that are essential and significant as we think about faith and moral governance as a trending ideologue, and that is sustenance and purification. And the second theorem or principle is freedom. Now, this principle or this element is quite tricky. Not so many Muslims are, on board with the concept of freedom, because they say that our freedom is within the bounds of the will of Allah, because we submit our own will we submit to the will of Allah. So there is actually no kind of a magnanimous operational definition of freedom. But for me, I define it as the absence of human coercive forces which would arbitrarily limit and curb decision. And you can see here, as you can read in the PowerPoint presentation, that Islam means free will that gives an understanding that is about a free choice of what is good and or that what is better. And the third element is moral authority. And for the Muslims that I've interviewed, and also from the, as I read the literature, for moral authority is legitimized by central belief in Tawhid or oneness of God, and also includes the Maqasid al-Sharia, which provides necessary validation and power to moral authority. And the fourth element is common good. This is attainable to the utilization of the principle of public welfare and public interest as the higher objective and meaning of common good as one of the characteristics of moral governance. And the last element is the what I call social ethics. Social ethics is highly manifested, and also I think this is very much apparent in when you read the Quranic verses. Many of the principles and also I think general understanding of social ethics are uprooted from the Quranic verses. So you can see that the last principle of the framework for moral governance is social ethics. It has actually interrelated principles of community, trust, justice, peace, and equality. Now, all of these elements can be seen in the Bangsamoro Organic Law. So they are all manifested within the preamble of the Constitution of the Bangsamoro Parliament. In terms of the freedom element, you can see that in Article 4 and Article 9 for the moral authority, in several articles and sections, as well as for the subsequent principles such as common good and social ethics as well. So these are, I think, the trending ideologue that are happening, and it's actually manifesting, and which is also being used by all the members of the parliament. So when they legislate laws, when they craft their bills, their legislative measures, their resolutions, it should always under the ambit of moral governance. So this is what is the present scenario of what's happening in the legislation making in the Bangsamoro Parliament that would provide solutions to different compounding and presenting problems, communal problems in terms of economic, health. Even in their health legislations during the COVID pandemic era, it was always under the ambit of moral governance when they do their legislations. So, so I think that's the present scenario of the Islamic trend that is happening in the Philippines. As I provided with you the historical past, because we couldn't, free ourselves unless we don't understand our history, our past, our memory, in order to, present ourselves in this present times and also encounter future challenges as we, proceed with our own lives. So as the head of the Policy Research and Legal Services of the Bangsamoro Parliament, we actually provide reviews all of those legislations, legislative measures that is always under the ambit and should always rely on the principles of moral governance as the present trending ideologue in the Muslim part of the Philippines. Thank you.